Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Optimove podcast. This episode is a replay of one of our first episodes ever. I love this episode because it covers who we are and why we do this podcast, but more importantly, it covers some really foundational information about Parkinson's, including why Big and Loud is not a full solution for Parkinson's and what to do instead, and so much more. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
Welcome to the Optimove podcast, empowering independence and optimal movement in the face of aging, neurological, and movement challenges. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Guild, physical therapist and strength and conditioning professional. This show is dedicated to empower you to achieve your optimal movement so you can fully engage in your life again. Today we're going to talk about the fear of falling and how walking slower, furniture walking, and being careful actually leads to falls and gives you poor balance. We'll also talk about how we empower people to reduce their risk of falling and to balance better by actually walking faster and more confident. Enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the first episode of the Optimove podcast. This is the very first episode of the podcast in which we're going to talk about empowering independence and optimal movement, no matter who you are, but especially if you are someone who is facing neurological challenges, aging, neurological diagnoses, or movement problems in general. Why we put this podcast together. So basically we wanted to bring out expert advice about movement problems in general. And, movement problems are something that a lot of times specialists will know a lot about. A lot of specialists in the strength and conditioning world, so strength and conditioning professionals, people who work with elite athletes, physical therapists, certain chiropractors, things like that, will specialize in movement. And it can be a very small group of people, a very esoteric world. And so what we want to do is bring that information out to the general public, because this sort of information can benefit everybody. And, yes, this podcast is especially geared towards people with neurological disorders and the aging population, but we're going to also have a lot of great information on here that will benefit everybody. So, whether you're 18 years old and wanting to run, whether you're an athlete or just 45 years old and just wanting to get back into the gym again without getting hurt, or someone with multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's, this podcast is for you. And so we're going to dive into detail in a lot of these different topics, and I think you're going to enjoy it quite a bit. We're going to provide a lot of great information, and my plan is to bring in some specialists as well and interview some great people so that we can dive even deeper into these topics in ways that you'll enjoy. So we'll get detailed, but we also want to we want to be able to communicate with you where you're at. We want to be able to reach out to educated professionals who want to consume a lot of great information and learn more about their health. Also for healthcare providers, healthcare providers can't always have their heads in the book or to be consuming dry information. They're working healthcare providers are working all day. You only have so much brain power in the day. And sometimes the best way to learn about a different topic in healthcare is by consuming content that's intended for the general public. And I know I've certainly done that and actually gained a lot of a better understanding by consuming that sort of information. So this podcast is for healthcare providers as well, whether you're a physical therapist, chiropractor, fitness professional, strength coach, doctor, whoever you are, we're going to provide a lot of great information for you if you're a healthcare provider as well. So everybody is likely to run into movement problems at some time in their life. How do you know this? If you've ever had an ache or a pain or an injury, likely it was caused by a movement problem. There was a break somewhere in the body where something was not moving correctly. And then we often too think of things such as x-rays and MRIs and things like that as, yep, there's the problem. That's why the injury is there. But the vast majority of the time, that's just the symptom. The MRI is just showing it's just a snapshot. But what actually caused the problem that appears on the MRI, that's what we really want to find out. And a lot of times, these sorts of injuries are caused by things that have been going on months or even years in advance, alignment issues, and again, basic movement problems that over time, the tissue basically says, okay, I can't take this anymore. And then we have an injury. So the key is to spot these movement problems in advance so we can actually prevent injuries. So everybody has movement problems at some point in their life. But we're also going to gear this podcast towards specific neurological conditions such as Parkinson, such as multiple sclerosis, dizziness and dizziness problems and vertigo, balance and falls and things like that, so that we can empower people suffering with these problems to be able to learn more about what's going on and how they can help themselves so they can move better. We're also going to gear this podcast towards the aging population, and more importantly, the families of people who are aging. So if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and you got some parents that are getting older and beginning to have problems with balance and they're falling, and if you're worried about how much longer can my mom or dad stay active and independent in their home and out in the community, and I don't want them to go to a nursing home like I'm seeing so many of their peers doing, this podcast is for you. So we're going to provide a lot of great information that will empower you to help your parents. Again, we'll bring in specialists on these types of topics as well. So why am I uniquely qualified to provide this information to you? So if you're going to provide the time to listen to me and get this great information, it's important for you to know why I'm uniquely qualified to help you. So I have a doctorate degree in physical therapy, and I'm also a strength conditioning professional. My previous career was as a strength conditioning professional, where I was focused more on the general public than elite athletes. Worked with Division I athletes, but quickly shifted towards the general public. I've worked in many different settings as a physical therapist, hospitals, nursing homes, memory care facilities, outpatient neurological rehab, outpatient orthopedics, hospice, and even some pediatrics, and time in also in a vestibular specialty clinic. We'll talk more about vestibular disorders because that's my particular specialty. And at this point, at the time of this recording, I'm owner of a private practice in which we provide a phenomenal mobile service to people in their homes. So a little bit more about me and my story. I started off as a strength conditioning professional, working with Division I athletes, and I actually did my undergraduate thesis on training for lower body power to prevent falls. So about the age of 21, I think it occurred to me that we had a major problem in our hands in society. The baby boomers, as they got older, were going to reach a point where falling would be a major concern. So I started dedicating my focus towards preventing falls, and did my undergraduate thesis on the topic. So as a strength conditioning coach, it made a lot of sense that the area was on basically strength and power in the legs, and how important that is in order to prevent falls. We'll get to that topic later on. It's not everything, and that's also what we'll talk about. But so I had a passion for taking strength conditioning principles to the general public, and so I began to work with people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and taking what I learned working with Division I athletes and then modifying those things towards the general public. Also, what I got working with the general public was learning how to assess very basic movement in order to prevent injuries way ahead of time. So if you think about the football player running into the end zone, and all of a sudden they pull a hamstring in the middle of a game. So it's important to understand that hamstring pull was months and perhaps even years in the making. It did not happen out of the blue randomly on the field. That injury was going to happen unless if somebody intervened to stop it. And the key is to spot why that hamstring is going to break, because there's basically a basic movement problem with that athlete. The athlete can jump high, they can run fast, they can do all these wonderful things, but sometimes they don't move very well at a very basic level. And the key here is to make sure that they can move well at a basic level before they do all these other things. And the problem is too often we don't look for these basic movement problems. And so then when athletes go and do all these higher level things, eventually their bodies break. This is also true for the general public. So I applied this principle to all the people I worked with in the general public in a fitness setting. So I would screen their movement before having them do complicated things, before loading them up with weight, looking at how they move at a basic level and to begin to correct those things way in advance. So for you physical therapists or fitness professionals out there who studied from Mike Boyle, Shirley Sarman, Gray Cook, Gary Gray, Chuck Wolf, all these people, those were my early influencers. So this led me to work with older people and people with physical limitations. So physical therapy school was a national transition. And while I was in physical therapy school, I began to specialize in vestibular disorders, worked with a great mentor that I worked with in school, and then also for my entire first year out of school, actually. Went back and worked with her, and we worked with people with mostly vestibular problems. So basically dizziness and vertigo, all day, every day, day in, day out, and then as well as some multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and various other neurological conditions. But dizziness and vertigo was our main specialty. And so that was the missing link, if you will, between for balance and falls. Yes, strength is important, power is important, but the main central balance system, the vestibular system, was that missing component that I needed to really focus clinically on why people fall. And so I pivoted towards specializing in that for that purpose. So basically we could address balance and falls head on. So I enjoyed working in these settings, especially working with people with neurological disorders and the older populations. Absolutely wonderful, thrilling population to work with. Loved every minute of it and just enjoyed working with them. I also saw that there was a gap between the time that the person would leave the clinic and then when they would go home, or the gap between when they would get done with their therapy and transition out of therapy. There was always a missing gap there that I felt needed to be filled. And I was usually the one trying to push for more therapy because they had a lot more that they wanted to achieve. Good enough, according to Medicare and the insurance companies, was not good enough for our clients and for what I thought that they could achieve. I thought they could achieve a lot more, but we were always dictated by someone else, by how far our patients could get. And so my focus on the practice was to empower people to get back to what they truly wanted to get back to doing, to get as good physically as they wanted to do, because our physical state and how we are physically impacts our daily life so much. And I've been in that situation with any type of injury. The slightest injury can cause significant psychological and quality of life challenges to people. So if we can improve their ability to move better, then we can truly impact their life. And too often people are cut off from therapy too early and are not able to achieve what they truly want to, even if they're completely motivated to do so. So that was a gap that I saw and I would often run into. Another gap was, when people would leave skilled nursing facilities or hospitals, I found there was not a great path for them to continue on into their home and get better. So I dedicated a practice towards working with people in their homes on a mobile service, providing a phenomenal experience for people in a way that they would enjoy, and bridging that gap between, leaving the hospital or leaving the skilled nursing facility and then transitioning into the home. And what I found is a lot of people very much enjoy working with therapy in their homes in general. And the home environment is also the perfect place for therapy because oftentimes in the clinic, we're trying to get a sense of the home environment. We're asking for questions, we're asking for measurements, we're asking for pictures and things like that to get a sense of what the home environment is like, let's say for a 90-year-old. So what better situation than to work with the 90-year-old in their own home? And so that way we can see what their life is truly like. And so that's what we get to do every day. And it's an absolute thrill to be able to work with our clients in the comfort of their own homes, and for our clients to be able to choose how good they want to be. It's completely up to them. And that's the fun part about it. And so the power is in their hands. So let's talk about who this podcast is for. So this podcast is for people who are experiencing problems with movement or specific neurological disorders, such as if you have an aging parent who's having problems with balance and falling, or an aging parent who's having problems with dizziness or vertigo. If you know somebody who has a specific neurological condition, such as Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis, if you yourself have a specific neurological disorder or condition, then this podcast is for you. If you're working to try to get back into a fitness setting, and you're just trying to lift heavier, run faster, achieve greater gains than before, and you want to be able to do it without injury, then this podcast is for you. If you're 45 years old and trying to get back into the gym, and to be able to do so in such a way and without getting hurt and get in shape and get fit again, but you're worried about getting injured along the way, then this podcast is for you, because we're going to have some particular insights for you in those sorts of situations. If you're a healthcare provider and want to learn more about what we're talking about, whether it's vestibular disorders, neurological conditions, movement disorders in general, if you're a doctor, physical therapist, chiropractor, this podcast is for you, because we're going to go in depth on movement problems, and which I guarantee you see every day in your practice as well. This podcast is also for fitness professionals who want to take their understanding to the next level, whether it's specifically geared towards screening athletes or the general public that you might be working with, that will help you in the gym and to prevent injuries. If you want to learn more about the clients that you're working with who might have multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's, because it's more common that these individuals are now going to fitness settings, which is a phenomenal thing. And so as a fitness professional, it's great to know more about specifics regarding with these individuals and what they're going through. If you just want to learn more about how to prevent these sorts of problems in general, then this podcast is for you. So at Optimove, we focus on individualized treatment and individualized solutions, and finding the root cause to movement problems, rather than putting a Band-Aid over the problem. So we want to find what's actually causing the movement issue at its root source. And we work with our clients on an individual and personalized level, communicating with them in a way that they enjoy and they understand, so that we can empower them to be able to get back to living the life that they want to lead. The key here is that personalized and individualized work that we do with our clients, and ultimately they're able to be empowered to achieve the results that they want by those methods. People don't like to be treated like a number. People don't like to be just shoved into a healthcare factory line, which too often is, we're seeing that these days, and our clients are talking about it quite a bit. They're only being seen by their doctor for 5 minutes. They're being, they're being seen by their physical therapist while the physical therapist is working with 4 different other people. And people don't like that. Our clients don't like that, and to be honest, the healthcare providers don't like it either. So both for the sake of our clients, for the healthcare provider, the physical therapists that work with us, and for those that we're going to bring onto this great team later on, we want to work with our clients in a way that both our clients and the therapists want to work, which is finding the root cause of the problem rather than covering it up with a Band-Aid, working with our clients in a way that's personalized and individualized. So here's what's actually happened with Parkinson's. The neurologist will refer their patients to a rehab team, with the expectation that every single person working with that person with Parkinson's on that rehab team is certified in Big and Loud, which is an actual certification. And so then, of course, the rehab team, wanting to make the neurologist happy, make sure that gets fulfilled. So they only then pull from their therapists who are certified in Big and Loud, and what they do with that person with Parkinson's is Big and Loud, because that's what the neurologist wants. And so it's not even what the therapists think needs to be done. The therapists are doing just basically what the neurologist wants done. The neurologist is doing it because, to their understanding, the evidence says that this is a great program for Parkinson's. It's all they know as far as rehab with Parkinson's. And so I think the neurologist is trying to get the person away from a situation where they're in a outpatient orthopedic setting that doesn't know how to work with Parkinson's. So they want to find specialists. And so the only specialists that they know about Parkinson's are those who are certified in big and loud. But what is also missing, though, is you have other therapists who might know very well how to work with people with Parkinson's, but they haven't put big and loud in their toolbox because for one reason or another, because that's all big and loud is. It's a tool in a toolbox. And if you're not familiar with big and loud, it's based on peer-reviewed evidence, and it's a great program. And it's basically emphasizing large movements and getting the person to speak loud and, and move big and all these things, which counters what Parkinson's does to the body, which is short, choppy steps, speaking more softly, small movements, and things like that. So it counters Parkinson's, but the problem is it's kind of a one-size-fits-all overpackaged solution. And that's the problem with those sorts of things. Same thing with boxing. When I first read the research on boxing for Parkinson's in physical therapy school, it was very exciting, and there's a lot of great evidence to support it. It's big movements, it's dynamic, it's multidimensional, and people like it, and it's very thrilling. But it's also being overly packaged at this point because everybody knows about it now. And it's great to have. It's great exercise, and it's great rehab. But it's also just a tool in a toolbox. And so what's missing right now for people with Parkinson's is that individualized solution for the root cause of their problem. Why are they hunched over? Why are they not able to take big steps? Why are they not able to walk as far as they would like? Why are they having problems freezing in between doorways and not able to get themselves out of that situation? They end up falling because they get frustrated, right? These are the sorts of things that these programs don't address, but individualized treatment, working with the person one-on-one, working with them where they are at their level, that's how to work with someone with Parkinson's. You can include the boxing, you can include the big and loud, you can include all those other principles because those are great tools to put in the toolbox, but they're also just tools in the toolbox. Ultimately, you need to find out why the person with Parkinson's is having problems moving to begin with, and how to, both from a physical perspective, psychological perspective, home environment perspective, family dynamic perspective, all those things fit into why that person is having problems walking through their doorway, or why that person is having problems walking in the house, or why they're having problems walking into a restaurant and having to be pushed into a wheelchair by their wife. True story, by the way. So if you address the root cause of the problem, then you might be able to get them to be able to walk around their home more easily. You might be able to get them to walk into a restaurant with a walker, or without a walker for that matter, instead of being pushed in by their wife. And that's a true story of one of our clients. And now that person is walking all the way into a food court in a mall. Why? Because we worked with he and his family in order to address why he was leaning forward so much, why he couldn't walk very far or very well, why he was falling. And so now he's falling a lot less, and he's walking a lot farther, and has an increased level of independence and improved quality of life and empowerment because of addressing the root cause of the problem.
And would it be fair to say that there are some people who just maybe like a standard good enough is good enough for them, and they don't want to go that extra step? But at least for the people who do, it should be an option, right? It's not fair that there aren't any options beyond just getting good enough.
Right. They need to have a choice. Yeah. And that's too often what's missing in healthcare. And what I found working in skilled nursing, for instance, I just happened to be working at one of the most affluent skilled nursing facilities in the area. And it didn't matter how much money or resources the person had. What happened after that point was significantly limited because there was no other option other than traditional home health, or if they couldn't get to outpatient, or even their options with outpatient only goes to a certain point. So a more personalized and individualized solution, no matter who the person was, whether they're in the wealthiest communities or whether they're middle class, all these things are important to keep people active and independent in their homes, because if you end up back in the hospital or go back to the nursing home, there's nothing more expensive than that. There's nothing more to take away your quality of life than that, or your independence, or the devastation to yourself and your family. So whatever can be done to prevent people from going back to the hospital, going back to skilled nursing, that's what we need to focus on as healthcare providers. And how can we do that? Communicating with them at the level that makes sense to them, working with them at the level that makes sense to them. And this is true of anybody, of any service. We just need to do a better job of that in healthcare. Okay, let's dive into the fear of falling and how walking slower, furniture walking, and being safer actually leads to falls and gives you a poor balance. So, which seems counterintuitive to most people. And the reason I bring this up is one of the most common things we hear from people. Older people will come to us and will tell us how their doctor and their children are saying to them all the time, be careful, don't fall, don't fall. And of course, they're telling themselves this as well because they're afraid of falling, if for no other reason, because they're seeing their friends all around them falling and ending up in the hospital, breaking hips and things like that. So the fear of falling is a significant problem. And so we hear from our clients all the time that they're being careful and being careful. Of course, the other thing we often hear from them is, well, I don't plan on falling, which of course we know all too well. You can't plan not to fall. So walking slower in and of itself is also a problem. And when I tell this to people, that if you walk faster, actually your balance will be better and you'll be at less risk of falls, people respond in shock, and they can't believe that that's the case. The perception is that if I walk slower and I'm more careful, then my balance will be better and I'll be at less risk of falling. So I'd like you to imagine a 20-year-old walking across the sidewalk. They're probably going to be walking fast, taking nice long strides. They're going to be swinging their arms. They can do multiple things at once. They can be talking on a cell phone and chewing gum and walking at the same time. They can be looking for cars. Not a problem. I want you to take that same 20-year-old and elevate the sidewalk 2 stories into the air so it's nice and high up. No railings that 20-year-old has to walk across. Now, I want you to imagine in your head how that 20-year-old is going to walk across the sidewalk. They're probably going to take very small steps. They're going to take short strides. They're going to walk very slowly, very hesitant. They're going to be very tense. Their body's going to be very tense. Their arms are not going to be swinging. Their head is not going to move. And they're going to, in a very rigid way and very careful way, walk across the sidewalk. That's how too often older people walk in just regular life in their house if they're afraid of falling or if they're being careful. So what does this do? So of course, psychologically, this puts them at increased risk of falling because they're being careful. Their muscles are tense. They're moving abnormally compared to the way someone should walk. So also mechanically, it increases their risk of falling. And the reason for this is so if someone begins to move abnormally, mechanically things begin to break down. So it's not just psychologically, but mechanically things begin to break down with the way someone walks. That increases their risk of falling. So big fancy word, gait variability. So this is basically one step after another is not the same as the other. This is actually in the research supported to be the most highly correlated attribute to increasing fall risk as far as the walking. So basically 1 foot after the other does not do the same thing. And this tends to happen when people walk slower. And so the other thing that tends to happen is the foot stays on the ground longer. And so if you can imagine basically standing with both feet on the ground, 1 foot stretched out far ahead of the other, and then just stand there without moving. How difficult is it to hold that position? So that position is where someone who walks slow actually stays for a longer period of time. And that's why we're actually less balanced when we walk slower compared to walking fast. So one step is not the same as the other. And also we hold that position longer, in which we're in the most level of imbalance. And so these are the exact mechanical causes as to why when we walk slower, we're actually at higher risk of falls and our balance is less. And of course, our stride length is less, and we don't swing our arms as much usually when we walk slower. And the arm swing is important because that's how we counterbalance our weight. Our hips don't swing as much when we walk slow. And of course, we begin to move abnormal in general. So our body remains tense, our muscles are tense, and our body remains very, very rigid. And so we cannot react to the environment in a very dynamic way that we need to. We can't move our head and look at and screen the environment the way we normally would if our body is very, very rigid. And these are the sorts of things that happen when people walk slow. So furniture walking is the next thing. So we can all think of an older person when they're walking across the room. They're touching every piece of furniture. They're touching walls. They're touching countertops, right? As they're walking simply in their home environment. And this starts off very, very subtle at first, but it can become more apparent over time. Sometimes if you're the child of an older person and you see your parent furniture walking, it's something you might notice, but it's not a major red flag, or it may be a major red flag. So I do want you to think of this as a red flag. If you see your parent furniture walking, this is a red flag. This is a major problem. So again, there are many mechanical reasons for this. There's also psychological reasons and also neurological reasons why furniture walking is a significant problem. You can think of furniture walking as the next smoking, especially as the baby boomers become older. Falling is going to become a significant problem. The oldest baby boomers right now, at the time of this recording, are about 75 years old. By the time they're about 80, and then as they approach 85, this is going to become a much bigger problem because a large percentage of the population are going to be at higher risk of falls. So we need to address these problems early on. So what actually happens when you furniture walk is, of course, the more obvious mechanical things. If eventually you're going to be reaching for something and it's not going to be there, or you're reaching for something and it'll be not as sturdy as you thought it would be, or you're reaching for something in general and it's not there. So that's one reason. Psychologically, of course, it's a downward spiral psychologically. If you're afraid of falling and then you continue to furniture walk, you're touching everything as you go, then that spiral is going to continue to continue. Neurologically, here's the biggest thing, and it's more subtle. As we're touching everything as we walk, we're not using our legs as much to help us balance. So we're becoming more reliant on our hands to help us balance rather than our legs. And it doesn't take much touch to help us. So I want you to imagine, let's say, an older person, and they're at an exercise class and they're standing on one leg and they're saying, I'm just going to put one finger on the table here to help me stand on one leg. Just one finger. That's all I need. That is all they need oftentimes. And the reason for that is because all they need is the sensation information from that table to their finger. That's all they really need in order to give their body a huge amount of information about how to balance, which as soon as they take that finger away from the table, then they're no longer able to stand on one leg. We see this all the time in fitness settings and in rehab settings. This is the same sort of situation that happens when people furniture walk. They're relying on this sensation from their hands as they're walking around. What this does is it takes away the use of their legs to help them balance. Even worse, their reaction to losing their balance begins to decline. So when an older person begins to fall backwards, eventually they no longer actually take a step backwards, or they don't take a step backwards fast enough. And then what we too often see is they fall and land on their head because they're no longer reacting quickly enough to when they lose their balance. And furniture walking is a huge contributing factor to that problem. What it also does is it increases the reliance on the older person's vision to help them balance. So we have three ways in which we balance. We have our vision, our eyes. We have our vestibular system, what you can think of that as our central balance system, the central hub. It's basically from the brain on down, and then proprioception and the sensation of our feet on the ground going up. proprioception is basically knowing where your legs are in space. So we have three ways in which we balance. If we become over dominant in one, it begins to, we have to compensate with another. So as older people furniture walk, they use their eyes too much. And then they begin to use their vestibular system and their proprioception less. We want older people to be using their vestibular system, their main central balance system. We want them to be using that more, and we also want them to be using as much of their proprioception, their ability to know where their legs are in space, as possible. So this is a very special sense that's very important. Sometimes it goes away as people get older for one reason or another, but however much proprioception that older person has from the sensation from their legs on up, we want that to be there. And we don't want them to ignore it. We want them to use it. And when people furniture walk, they're using their eyes more often instead of their legs. And that's the main takeaway. So this is like anything else in healthcare. If you don't use it, you lose it. So if we don't use our vestibular system, if we don't use our proprioception, then our body begins to ignore those things, or those things begin to weaken. And so that contributes to the downward spiral. We become overly reliant on our vision. We become overly reliant on touching other things with our hands as we walk. Then what ultimately happens is the main ways in which we balance begin to decline, become weaker, and our body ignores them more and then goes to the crutches in order to help us balance. And that's what we want to avoid as we get older. So, and again, this all becomes a big downward spiral. So let's talk about what we can do instead of furniture walking. First off, if you're furniture walking, it might be true that you do need a device. You might need a cane or a walker for one reason or another, but also knowing whether you need a cane or a walker is the first question. So too often, if older people are furniture walking, it becomes a crutch to be able to be independently mobile. But what happens if you take the furniture walking away? So then you have to actually address the problem. And what I would recommend here is get evaluated by a physical therapist who can let you know for sure what you need, what type of a device you need. It may be the case where you don't need a cane or a walker at all. It may just be a bad habit that the person has gotten into because too many people have been telling them, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, be careful, be careful, be careful. And then they start subtly at first and then gradually more and more start touching furniture as they walk around their house. Again, this is kind of like the new smoking. As people get older, furniture walking is a habit that's very, very difficult to break, and we see this every day. And so the other way that we address it is to actually address the root cause of their balance problem. And when we do that, then it improves their physical ability to balance. And of course, that empowers them to no longer furniture walk. So it becomes the solution to the smoking, if you will. And that is the conclusion of our first podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We're going to keep delivering great content for you on a regular basis, so you can continue to get more great information from us, no matter who you are and the type of movement problems that you're running into. So if you have any questions or want to reach out to me, you can contact me at j.guild@optimovedfw.com, GUILD, and just put podcast on the subject line. You can subscribe to Optimove Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review, and so more people can find out about us and be empowered to move better. You can also find us at optimovedfw.com, or you can find us on Facebook and view even more content that we have and get access to our blog as well. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you can call us directly at 214-712-8242. That's it for the show. I look forward to speaking with you on episode 2.